for Alien Jesus 4. This is Close Encounters on Night Owls. As night falls, suddenly every sight and every sound can unnerve you. Can we really trust our own minds? Night Owls presents the return of Alien Jesus, Close Encounters.
When you tell people about your experiences, do they believe you?
You know, it's not my job to convince anybody. It's my job just to tell you what I've experienced. If you believe it, fine. If you don't believe it, I don't care.
Some of them have long-term, like lifelong relationships with the humans that they interact with, and they create hybrid children.
What is still true is that there's still kind of a reptilian side of our brain.
They're friendly and they're helpful, and very often they will answer questions that the experiencer might have.
If I could sit down with one of them right now, I'd ask them one question. Why me, and for what reason?
Are we being visited by otherworldly beings on a regular basis? Night Owls goes in search of the truth. This is Alien Jesus, Close Encounters.
Alan Robson with you for Alien Jesus 4, Close Encounters. And I'm at a place right now that hundreds of thousands of people from Britain travel to every year, Florida. And yet, I'm at a place called Cabo Canaveral, Cape Canaveral. In the distance, I can see the conning towers where spaceships and space shuttles fly into space. I've been around talking to a lot of people. You can hear everything that I've got. Some people didn't want to talk to us. Some people did. You're going to get the full story tonight. And why here? Why in Florida? Well, I'm actually at a place that's been occupied by human beings for 12,000 years. And the people who lived here were very, very special indeed. The native Indians from this part of the world were a different colour to anywhere else on planet Earth. They were dark red. Not suntanned, not sunburnt. They were dark red. And from the years 5000 BC up to 2000 years BC, this area around what is now Cape Canaveral had a fascinating culture of its own, but a culture unlike any of the other Native Americans. A lot of people say it's because this area, this precise place where, coincidentally, maybe, the Americans decided to build one of their biggest NASA installations. I'm standing in the Indian River at a place called St. John's, staring across sandbanks and sea towards the place on Earth that most people get a chance to look at here in Florida. But tonight, we're not here to talk about people who lived long ago. We're here to tell you that on the planet right now, we are living with aliens. As you can hear, I'm splashing about Indian River, just wondering what it must have looked like if the Native Americans were telling the truth. And we hear stories from South America. We've covered this in great detail in previous shows, how they all claim to have witnessed shining creatures coming from the stars. The Native Americans, their ancestors, people that bred with their tribes, disappeared back up to the stars. That's why whenever you watch these American Western films, whenever a Native American wants to bury one of their own, they build huge high platforms right up to the sky and rest the body as high up as possible so that they can return to the rest of their family up there in the stars. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do, I know it's a beautiful day here, absolutely gorgeous, got to be, oh blimey, middle 70s here, probably 80. My arms are beginning to burn, and of course I've slapped a bit of sun cream on, but it's not helping too much. I am sizzling here. And yet, can you imagine being a Native American looking up to the skies and seeing these shining creatures come down. Now, it may well be that you don't want to believe 12,000 years of history, because the Native Americans have written and talked about the shining creatures, their ancestors in the stars. They've talked about that since the dawn of their being. I'm going to need you to suspend what you believe just for the duration of this show. Hundreds of sightings all over the world. Hundreds of thousands of abductions, first-hand accounts, and we can now come up with, if what everybody's telling us is correct, or even if that magical 5% are telling us the truth. Alien species have been working with military forces, maybe even deciding what our future is going to be, without ever consulting us. And there are certain types of aliens. There's the Syrians, not from Syria, but from a star system called Sirius B. People say they're ancient, with a gift for curing people. They gifted the ancient Egyptians with medical and astronomical information, helped them build the pyramids and their great temples that they couldn't have built on their own. The Mayans, apparently, in South America, just down the road from where I am, they had this special relationship with people from Sirius B. They played a part in the disappearance of them, but not before they left artifacts, the amazing crystal skulls that we still don't have the technology to build ourselves, yet there they are in museums across South America. Also from Sirius B, the Atlanteans. Apparently there was a huge event that sunk Atlantis. Everybody's heard about it, nobody can find it, but we knew that it existed. Well, apparently the people from Sirius B led rescue operations. The Dogon tribe of West Africa, they too have details of exactly how to get to Sirius B. Now, we didn't know that until the late 1950s. The Dogon tribe knew it 500 years AD. How? It's far, far too far to ever see with a human eye or a telescope. So they were involved during our past, and we don't know how much, and are they still involved now? Also, how many times have you heard people say, oh, but it was the Greys. I saw this short figure, and it had big white eyes, tiny little nostrils, and a slit mouth. The Zeta reticulums, they're called, the Greys. The most common ones. This is what E.T. was based on. This is what the majority of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, or even Independence Day to a degree. And according to the people who claim to have seen them, they're between 3 and 5 feet tall. They've got this huge circular head, too big for a very slim neck, and oversized black eyes. Despite having a mouth, pretty much everybody says they speak telepathically with one another. And they have a genetically engineered worker race, kind of like how bees have worker bees. They've got a type of worker controlled by the tall greys. The short greys seem to be the workers of the colony. And their telepathic abilities, obviously, would be able to help them control us, maybe. They're also responsible for creating a hybrid race. They've had sex with people on Earth to create a new type of person. Half alien, half human. Then there's the tall greys. They're the superiors, supposedly. Not quite as long a neck, smaller head, still big eyes, very small nostrils, downturned mouth. Now, they can stand between 7 and 10 feet tall. The Grey Masters, some people call them. And it is believed that these are the people who've had direct communication with our military forces. A lot of people believe they come from the constellation of Orion. The tall greys apparently supervise all abductions. They're the ones responsible for experiments on human beings and people from other planets. But they prefer to employ the services of those shorter greys to do all the dirty work. An advanced race, a confident race that have little value on human life. They don't mind if you're going to be probed. If you die, you die. If you have to be left somewhere bleeding, they will leave you bleeding. There's also a race known as the Alpha Draconians. Now, they came to Earth apparently from colonies on Alpha Draconis. Where they were before that, nobody really knows. But they're reptilian. Now, in Alien Jesus 1, we talked a lot about the reptilians. We even found how by playing what they say backwards, you can pick up a very, very different sentence. They're between 14 to 22 feet tall. Now, that's monstrous. They've got muscular bodies. They're covered in a brown or a lightish green scaly skin. Fairly intelligent, with large heads and particularly reptilian eyes. Some people have said they've got tails, others say they've got wings. Nobody really knows. But apparently, they're the force trying to repress humanity. They're clairvoyant, they're clever, in fact, they're quite sinister. And they're the first intelligent species to evolve anywhere in a Milky Way galaxy. They want to compete, they want to take over worlds, they want to populate as many worlds as they possibly can. They have immense egos and they believe themselves the rightful rulers of all planets, including Earth. They exploit the human race because they believe we're an inferior species. Problem is, now we've got native reptilians. Reptilians that are native to Earth. Now, these are people who look like us, walk like us, dress like us, yet they hold positions of power. Premiers, some believe presidents, queens, kings of society. They manipulate the elite. They rule our institutions. They take charge of our organizations. They've built a huge financial system, and they influence directly every religion on the planet. An underground reptilian race is said to control the media and all media corporations. So why am I telling you this? Am I telling you this because I know it for myself? They are behind most crimes against humanity. And then, probably the most famous of all the aliens, the Anunnaki. An amazing race from another galaxy that they call Ilion. Their home world was called Risk, and when that was destroyed, they built an intergalactic vessel, a spaceship, to get them off the planet, called Nibiru. Now, before coming to Earth, they colonized a whole batch of planets in and around the Orion star system, and they came to Earth close to 1 million years ago. They came down here for minerals. They came down here to see what the planet had to offer, how it would benefit them as a growing society. Minerals that were scarce in the universe, but all over the place down here. In need of a workforce, they created mankind. Through genetic manipulation and in vitro fertilization, they upgraded apes to Homo sapiens. Present on Earth, they've been here all along. The Anunnaki also influence every aspect of human life. We have inherited their culture of violence and their culture of vengeance and hatred. It's tagged in our DNA. because it's partly their DNA. So when you see people fighting, it's normal, it's natural, but it comes from them. They are in direct competition with the Draconians for control over you, over me, and over every other person who lives on Earth today. Now, those people that back in the day, the Native Americans of this part of Florida, this incredible vision from above that landed here and has lived here for 1 million years. They take control, they rule, they teach, they educate, they crossbreed. This is not just a them and us. We are them too. For our relatives way, way back in history, interbred. And now we're this multicoloured alien race living on this planet. But our home, way, way, way back, our true home isn't here. It's on the other side of a galaxy, on a star or on a planet that none of us will likely see in our lifetime. We are far from home. It's the Night Owls from Florida.
This is Alien Jesus 4 on Night Owls.
Alan Robson with you here in Florida. I don't know whether you can tell, but in the distance, an open-topped long bus has just passed me with a lot of giggling children and mums and dads enjoying a trip out at Cape Canaveral. It's open. The whole space station, you can go and see some of the old rockets that have been sent up previously. They've got a rockets graveyard right at the front of an amazing place. You've got to check it out for yourself. From the Apollo flights and Saturn 1 and Saturn 1B, they've got all kinds of things here. And you can even see what it feels like to get that push of gravity when you take off. They've got a lot of very, very cool gadgets that you can play on if you really are as interested in space as we're becoming. And people say, well, I've seen a UFO. Yes, we've covered that in previous alien shows. We accept 95% of them are probably something else, but that magical 5%, they're out there. We know they're out there. And there's ultimate proof. Do you know that there's been a satellite? In fact, a spaceship that became a satellite up in our orbit. How long? When do you think the first one went up? Everybody's saying, oh, we know what that is. We've heard about it. It was called Sputnik. And it was in the 1950s, wasn't it? Well, no. It was 11,000 years before Christ. Now just take that in. There has been a something, they call it the Black Knight, travelling around our planet for 13,000 years. Now, we as humanity didn't put it there. Fact, we couldn't put it there. 13,000 years ago, we were stumbling about. Now, it's up there. The USA and the Soviet Union, they both thought it was each other's. The Americans thought it was the Russians thought it was the Americans. Rumours are that it was one of Tesla's first interception crafts. However, subsequently, as it's been witnessed in the skies since the dawn of time, 13,000 years it's been travelling around. They've decoded some information from it, and the information on it is otherworldly. Spaceman Gordon Cooper, back in 1963, he said in his report that he saw a glowing green object in front of his capsule moving towards his craft. Tracking stations in Australia and America, they said, yes, it is. It's approaching as if it had intellect. This is not just a bit of space junk rolling around there. If it senses something up there that it doesn't know about, it investigates it. Now, if it's not ours, who is it investigating it for? Is the Black Knight one of these extraterrestrial satellites sent to Earth to study the human race, to keep an eye on us? Did it at one time try to communicate with us? Did we ignore those communications? The Black Knight is one of the most mysterious things that we have orbiting our planet. And is there a connection between that and the amazing achievements that ancient mankind made? We only started to create things when it arrived. Is that too big a coincidence? And it wasn't that long ago that some of our NASA astronauts discovered on the moon there are ruins. I'm not talking craters, ruins, buildings that have been knocked down. And apparently, Ken Johnston, who manned the Apollo lunar program in the States, was ordered to destroy the images that spacecraft have taken of the moon. Now, Johnston didn't follow the order, and the photographs got out. And he was eventually told, in secret, that the American government had been keeping this information secret for 40 years. It appeared in a book called Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA. And NASA admitted there are buildings on the moon that were once occupied by people. Now, people infers us, and yet we've never built anything on the moon at all. We were lucky to get up, plant a flat flag, and get the hell off again. And yet, according to their First Amendment, that protects free speech, that's afforded to all NASA employees, even the bosses, Ken Johnston said, "I have nothing to lose. I've quarrelled with NASA, my own company, and I got fired." Yet the photographs that we have in the book depict ruins of buildings, huge dome-like objects made of glass, stone towers, and even castle walls that almost appear as if they're hanging in the air. Now that is a kind of building that we can't do. So who built them? Where did these people come from? Glass domes on the moon? Now, the authors of the books, the people who have worked at NASA, say that President John F. Kennedy, who launched the lunar race with the Soviet Union, they were all trying to get rockets up as quick as they could so that they could be the ultimate superpower. Well, Kennedy said that he was going to share extraterrestrial technology with Russia. He made a speech at the United Nations Organization in September 1963, offering the USSR to organize a joint mission to the moon. Imagine that. The two powers that fought one another together, working for mankind. How great would that be? And that was the moment that the world's interest in moon exploration suddenly appeared. Based on lunar findings that the American government had been keeping secret for 40 years. Russia, China, Japan, even India said they were going to work towards exploring the moon. That December, NASA announced plans to build an international base on one of the poles of the moon to be finished by 2014. Russia's booster rocket maker Energia has a more ambitious program. They want to be there by the end of next year. Russia said that the base will be built to develop the industrial production of helium-3. The Americans say it's got nothing to do with it. China launched its first satellite last year, October 24th. Kennedy's name was mentioned, and a lot of people believe that it is what he said about aliens that led to this.
The presidential car coming up now. We know it's the presidential car. You can see Mrs. Kennedy's pink suit. There's a Secret Service man, spread eagle, over the top of the car. We understand Governor and Mrs. Connolly are in the car with President and Mrs. Kennedy. We can't see who has been hit, if anybody's been hit, but apparently something is wrong here. Something is terribly wrong. I'm pulling in now toward Parkland Hospital, coming to the approach. An officer waving me down. He's waving me around. There's a cordon. There's already a cordon of police officers running from their cars, from their vehicles here. The official party, as I can see it, pulling around toward the emergency room.
The President of the United States is dead. President Kennedy has been assassinated. It's official now. The President is dead.
That was Dallas, 22nd of November 1963. John F. Kennedy was joking with his agents and said, well, you know there's no such thing as absolute security. He was joking about how a president could be assassinated at any time. All you need is a sniper with a rifle scope, maybe positioned high on a tall building. Now, was he afraid? Did he know? The fact was, by lunchtime of that day, President Kennedy was dead. Shot by a marksman using a telescopic sight from the 5th floor of a school book depository in Dallas, a few hundred miles west of where I am right now. The suspected shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald, was arrested, but he would never testify. 40 hours after Kennedy's murder, he got assassinated. Now, between 1963 and 1982, loads and loads and loads of different committees asked the questions, who was behind it? Why was he killed? And yet, it was only probably 15, 20 years ago that the American Congress said that all existing files on the assassination must be released by 2017 at the latest. Now, the CIA had ignored this and they'd kept everything totally secret. And when they were looking at the files, they saw one of them marked CIA's Langley headquarters. In 1963, you've got to remember what the world was like. It was a tinderbox. It was at the height of the Cold War. They were expecting nuclear weapons to be fired at people. The smallest thing that happened, everybody was saying, we're all going to die. Now imagine, as is proven in these documents, the CIA goes behind President Kennedy's back. They carry out a few espionage operations against Russia, secret reconnaissance. Planes taken off from Area 51 in Nevada and extreme altitudes so that the Russians couldn't pick them up. They entered Soviet airspace. Now, imagine what would happen. Everybody goes crazy. The alarms raise. People's running around. We're going to be bombed. It's the beginning of the Third World War. Well, newly discovered secret files show that by November in 63, Kennedy was asking questions. And by asking questions, he wasn't making any friends. He was asking the CIA about aliens. Now, murdering their own president, a risky business for the CIA. So how could Kennedy have forced his Secret Service to act like they did? In other words, they gave him no protection at all during that trip to Texas. They did this because he pushed them into a corner. He didn't give them a chance for long-term action, something prepared. In reality, Kennedy became an immediate risk that the CIA were not prepared to deal with. He wanted every member of the public to have full access to the UFO files. In a letter to the Secret Service on the 12th of November, remember, he got killed on the 22nd, on the 12th of November, the CIA said they didn't want them released at all costs. But the coup to stop him failed. And this was, Kennedy had to pay the price. Those documents must not be released. The public must not know. The CIA know best. Now, this was a political debacle. And Did Kennedy have to pay the price? I mean, we as a society, are we not intelligent enough to want to know the truth? The extent to which the Secret Service felt pushed into a corner is shown by a statement from its director, John McCone. Lancer, that was Kennedy's code name, John McCone wrote in one of these documents, Lancer, Kennedy, has asked questions about our activities with aliens. We cannot allow that under any circumstances. And by the 22nd of November, less than 9 days, Kennedy was dead.
Washington, D.C., on the 20th of January 1953. Dwight D. Eisenhower succeeded President Harry S. Truman. Eisenhower had a strong military background and was the first president to apparently be aware of alien activity before taking office. In 1952, Eisenhower was aboard the USS Roosevelt during a NATO training exercise. At 1:30 a.m., a bright ball of light appeared, hovering 100 feet above the water. Eisenhower and several others watched the UFO for over 20 minutes before it sped off into the night sky. Upon taking office, Eisenhower dug deeper into unexplained reports. He became aware of Majestic 12 and demanded to know the extent of the alien threat. But Majestic 12 wouldn't let anyone, even the president, into their inner circle. He responded by sending a team to confront them on his behalf. An anonymous witness to these events attended the citizens' hearing in Washington, D.C. on UFO phenomena and the government.
He's trying to find out something about these aliens that MJ-12 was supposed to find out, but never sent back reports to him. So he said, I want you to fly out there. I want you to give him a personal message. He says, I want you to tell them, whoever is in charge, tell them that to get into Washington and to report to me. And if they don't, I'm gonna get the 1st Army from Colorado and we're gonna go over, we're gonna take the base over. I don't care what kind of classified material you got. We're gonna rip this thing apart.
This is Alien Jesus.
Alan Robson speaks to real-life abductees. This is Alien Jesus, Close Encounters.
Now, one man who seems to have dedicated his whole life to the hunting of UFOs, it's Russ Kellet. Hello, Russ.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Good to talk to you. What got you into all of this in the first place, then?
A journey home. One night, I had a close encounter. I had missing time. I had facial burns, burns on my hands as well. And that was the start of it, seeing a lot of UFOs after that time. And then it progressed, seeing these strange creatures and having what appeared to be like shadows come through my bedroom wall and communicate with me and then leave the same way back through the bedroom wall.
It does sound, to the skeptic, where's the jacket, let's lock this man away.
Absolutely crazy. And of course I started researching this, trying to find answers, going out on sky watchers and actually filming with my team some of the best footage that's ever been taken anywhere around the world, to be honest.
So really it seems the secret to this isn't really a secret, is if you look for it, it's there to be found then?
To be quite honest, I wasn't looking at first. Like I said, this happened to me on a journey home one evening from, I'd been in a bike club and I'd gone to a pub to see somebody about a job that needed doing on my bike. And this is where it all started from. So I wasn't even looking. I was too busy having fun with my biker brothers.
But hang on, you lost some time on the way back. Where were you when you found yourself again?
Right, well, basically what happened was I was at a railway, a level crossing, and I was waiting for I could see these red lights coming down, so I slowed down, thinking that it was the level crossing, the actual barriers coming down. So I'm sat there waiting for a train to pass. There's a bright light all around me. I thought it was a vehicle behind me, getting a bit too close for comfort, so I looked round. And basically there was no truck there, no wagon. And I mean, it was a massive light, and I'm thinking to myself, that's strange. And then when I looked off my petrol tank, I could see the reflection was coming from the sky downwards. So I looked up and I felt like I was floating and all this type of thing. Then the next thing I realised that the lights were more or less, the red lights had gone back up, like the barriers. I was sat there with a bit of a bump, and sort of like I came around as if I'd been asleep, sort of thing.
Right.
The air was in me. I had an half-face helmet, so the breeze was in my face and what have you. And I thought I'd better start my journey home. So, I had work in the morning. So on my way home, there was this. I can only describe it as a big ball of light followed me for miles and miles, and then basically it shot in front of me and took off into the sky, and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, something at the side of the road going over edges and around buildings and over trees, and then it just shot right in front of the road. And so I pulled over, and sort of like, I used to smoke, I had a cig, and it was only cigs, by the way.
Right.
And I'm sat watching this craft go over towards Halifax, a place called Halifax.
Yeah.
So then I thought, right, I better move myself, get back home. So I'm coming to my home, and I see my house all in darkness, which is a bit strange because everybody's usually up, and I didn't think it was too late because it was a work day next morning. So I gets in. The next morning, I'm awoken by my mum shouting, "Come on, I don't know why you get in late and whatever when you know there's work." So gets up, gets to work, and only just got through the door, and one of the lasses started laughing, and she said, "Have you seen your face?" And I said, "Have you seen yours?" And she said, "No, seriously." She said, "What have you done with it?" So took my crash helmet off, and it was an half-face crash helmet, and you could see that I had a sunburn. It looked like a sunburn. Anyway, it wasn't a sunburn, but, and the back of my hands and my neck. And so this had happened, I presume, when I was sat at the level crossing.
Yeah.
Like I say, so that was the start of things. Then I was with my girlfriend, cutting through a cemetery with a few of us mates, and this creature basically came behind me, and everybody ran. I was left behind. My girlfriend looked around, and she said that this thing had taken me, and I'd gone for about 45 minutes, and she was crying, and basically I ended up back in the cricket ground just off of the estate where we lived. And she said, "Where have you been? And what was that thing behind you?" It was like, this big creature type, thing. So again, that was another.
You must have seen this creature, presumably an alien, we think.
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah. What did it look like then?
Have you ever seen the film Nosferatu?
Yes, of course.
Well, it was like
Max
that.
Schreck.
About quite big.
Bald.
Pointed it just like Nosferatu.
Right.
But muscly and. But then those others that have come and taken me, again, this sounds crazy. Some of these are like 10 foot tall, and they all look the same, like Nosferatu, sort of like...
It's not a good look to come for your mind, is it? My goodness. Because he was the first real depiction of horror in any kind of movie. Bald head, very, very tall, long, thin fingers.
Yeah, and these things wore like... some kind of tight jumpsuit with an emblem on, and communicated, you could say, like telepathically in some ways, but they can actually talk. One of the first things I remember was being in a room with a checkerboard floor with two pillars, one at each side, with like these big balls of light on top.
Right.
And all these creatures, really tall creatures all around, and they were sort of like wearing like helmets and cloaks and stuff. You know, like knights.
Uh-huh.
Knights of old, you know, like Templars.
Uh-huh.
And I remember that, and sort of like floating, you know, sort of like in the middle where these balls of light was, in the middle of these two pillars.
Wow. And you were floating, though? You weren't on a table of any kind?
No, nothing like that. No anal probing, no tables, no nothing like anything that you've heard before.
Any smells? Any other senses tweaked?
Yeah, sort of like, it smelled a bit like incense burning, that type of thing. This is, you know, even now, when I used to ride me bike, you know, sort of like you get that smelling, you know, that burning sensation smell just after summer when, you know, leaves are burning, you know, like that type of thing. And that always brings back this memory.
Listen to this. It's fantastic. I happen to be in a very small Mexican town. I've travelled across here because this is a place of immense significance. There's a temple on the outskirts of this town called Calakmul. Now, if you were to get yourself on the internet and have a look, you will see that there is an amazing Mayan pyramid that spreads right the way up to the sky. And once again, we keep talking about their direct contact at every level of their society with people from the other side of the galaxy. In case of the Mayans, they were here, they were gone. They died out completely. Tell me the name of any other race on Earth today that over our time on the planet has become completely extinct. There isn't one. There's always a child. No entire race disappears. It's never happened. You know, we've had people like Hitler trying their best to exterminate Jewish people. They're everywhere. It's impossible to end an entire race unless they all left of their own volition. Now, here in Calakmul, it's a very, very green town. You can hear in the distance music from cantinas and people sitting outside smoking long pipes. This is a very, very rural Mexican area. This is not a place overtaken with drugs. This is a place with farmers. And yes, there's a little city area, but it's tiny in comparison to the amazing Yucatan region that I'm in here in southern Mexico. It's a huge separate domain, and from the sky there is the glyph of a snake. The way that the rivers run, it looks like a snake. Now, if we're talking people from the stars who had a reptilian bent, to see this massive snaking would be eminently attractive. You remember there were snakes and reptiles featured in the Nazca lines that I visited in Peru. But coming across here is an absolute eye-opener. Like a lot of the temples or pyramids that you've got around Central and Southern America, this one is an absolute whopper. It covers 2 square kilometers, and it's about 20 square kilometers with all of the structures around it. This was part of something built by people not of this world. And if you don't believe that, when you get out to places like this, the people here talk about it in a very matter-of-fact way. Oh yes, this is when the people came from the stars. Oh yeah, when they came down here, they landed, they helped us build the pyramid. It's very matter-of-fact. It's the same thing that we would say, like, well, Queen Victoria once visited Teesside, or King Albert once went across Newcastle's Tyne Bridge. It's very matter-of-fact. They don't say it to shock. They say it because it's their truth. And let me tell you something else, because they've found some Mayan documents. Now, the documents are quite rare, but I think it's all becoming very, very clear. And I know a lot of you will have doubts about contact with E.T. But I think a lot of people are beginning to realise the truth that's been talked about for centuries. When the Mexican government released documents and a whole batch of artefacts that they found here at Calakmul, well, it made E.T. seem like, yes, he obviously did come here. How else could we have these things? And the National Institute of Anthropology and History found a couple of discs here at Calakmul. And this discovery fired a blow to the chin of anybody who thinks for 1 second that aliens haven't been here. The discs were made by Mayans. They were found 80 years ago here in Calakmul. Now, when you have a look at these discs, there's a spaceman in a spacesuit in a spaceship. There are 4 pictures of spaceships on one side of the disc. On the other side of the disc, there's a spaceship landing. There's another one taking off. These are, there's no question, they're spaceships. And yet, remember when they were found? In the 1920s, 1930s? However, this is from the time that the Mayans were here. Now, you got to remember that the Mayans weren't here in the 20s. They only found these things from that time. We go back way back into history. It may well have been 500 years BC, because they were here then. 500 years BC, they made these discs. And if you looked at the picture, and do have a look at these things, have a look at the these very special things. Type in Calakmul discs or alien discs, and the Mexican government had to go on television and say Mexico will release codices, artifacts and all significant documents with evidence of Mayan and extraterrestrial contact, and all of the information will be corroborated by archaeologists. The Mexican government is not making this statement on their own. Everything we say, we are going to back it up. And then they released the discs as soon as anybody saw them. I mean, experts like Klaus Dorner or Dr. Nassim Haraiman, during a conference in Saarbrücken in Germany in June 2011, said, "This is absolute proof of alien involvement with Earth." There's 2 trays. One of them has an alien in a spacesuit, all wired up with oxygen and all that kind of thing. On the other side of the tray, there's a spaceship firing down an alien, putting him on Earth with a beam. If you look at the discs, one part of it is believed to be the Earth and its atmosphere, depicted by 2 rings. There's a comet or asteroid moving towards Earth. There's also a picture of a specially designed spacecraft to hit or deflect the comet. The other thing on it is an astronaut controlling the craft, and the other one is a spaceship that's being controlled as if by remote control. Now, this is all put down 500 years BC. Now, Luis Augusto Garcia Rosado is the highest ranking government official in Mexico who's gone on record. And he said, contact between the Mayans and extraterrestrials, supported by translations of the documents we have found, and there are landing pads in the jungle 3,000 years old. And then, after he delivered that, suddenly, nothing from the Mexican government. Too late. The cat is out the bag.
Alan Robson goes in search of the truth and talks to real-life abductees.
Lo and behold, this alien just appeared like a ghost.
What did he look like?
Well, it's hard to explain. I'll give you an example of what it looked like. It looked like, if you can imagine looking at your thumb now.
Right.
Yeah. Cut half your thumb off, so you've got half a thumb.
Gotcha.
And put 2 slits for eyes, just under your fingernail.
Right. Did they have arms?
No arms, no mouth, nothing. Just eyes.
Right.
All they wanted on them was information, I could tell them certain things, but certain things I couldn't tell them. And that's when they really got nasty.
So were they speaking English? Because you mentioned they just had eyes. How were they communicating
they were
with you?
By thought.
By thought,
yeah.
All right.
And they took me to a place up in the moon, and these vast caves and corridors where they just hover around, basically.
Now, the one thing that he didn't tell you is that for those people who follow the whole thing about alien phenomena, that there are a particular type of alien known to NASA and known to science as Marklar. You can look them up on your computers. And if you have a look at what Marklar aliens look like, they've got a huge round head like a thumb, 2 eyes, and no mouth. Marklar, look them up. Also, you may have thought, Horsehead Nebula, that's not likely. Well, it's real. It's a dark nebula in the constellation Orion. The nebula's located just to the south of the star Alnitak, which is the farthest east on Orion's belt. It's 1,500 light years from Earth, and there have been sightings of aliens by people like NASA for many, many years. The UFO sightings, it almost looks like the UFO's moving, but I've got in front of me a picture of alien craft spinning around the nebula itself. So NASA claimed to have seen aliens all around the Horsehead Nebula. They look exactly like the Marklar tribe of aliens, and again the Horsehead Nebula region, and they're there apparently, and a lot of people claim that they have lived there and they're aware of their existence, and whether he was aware, he never mentioned Marklar, but fortunately, if you've studied these kind of things, they kind of pop up and scream at you. Could he be right?
Hi, it's Alan Robson back in the studio, because whenever we mention aliens, people come forward kind of poo-pooing the idea, and I understand that. Makes sense to me. Question everything, disregard 95%, but look out for the 5% that you can't get round. Now, a set of images have recently been revealed from 1971. They've gone all over the internet. They were taken from a boat called the USS Trepang SSN 674 submarine as it travelled between Iceland and Norway's Jan Mayen Island. Now, a number of UFO hunters say that the photographs are evidence of secret US aircraft tests. Other people say that they are alien ships looking for new places to drill for oil and minerals that they value. Now, one of the first pictures looks clearly like a UFO on its side, trapped in the ice. It is absolutely saucer shape. It's got windows on the side, and a set of those images set forums ablaze when they first came out. Alex Mistretta, who is an investigator, studied the images when they appeared for the first time in a French magazine called Top Secret. And the fact that they were taken from a US submarine kind of gave it more credence. Official records back up the claim. Some people say you still can't say for sure that it is a UFO, and yet one of the pictures shows a UFO that looks to be upside down, just hanging. I mean, it's not on the seabed, it's hanging probably 10 meters above the seabed. Now, surely anything that has weight attached to it would just sink. It would be on the seabed. Surely anything of any weight would be down there on the ground, but not these. Another one shows the end of something just sticking out of the seabed, as if maybe a UFO has crashed into the sea, splashed all the way down, and stuck itself in the ground. Now, we are getting massive increases of UFO reports, but more and more and more are coming from under the sea, as if they're finding things that they need under the sea. People are saying that they're seeing craft come out of the sea and flying straight off at a speed impossible here on Earth. I mean, MUFON, who we've been talking to, cited 1,179 unexplained crafts in a single month last year. In 1 month. Multiply that by 12, and about a third of them coming directly out of the sea. Now, Bill Smiley is a commentator on these kind of things, and he suggested that the images may be of a single object that's able to change its shape. Now, think about this. We've got TV shows and movies about the Transformers. Metal things that can change their shape. And it makes sense. And, we hear about places that have been damaged by fracking. Some people believe that the very first fracking was done by UFOs searching for minerals that they can't get in their home planet. But these pictures, air-shaped or cigar-shaped craft, they've been reported since way back in 1896, where there was waves of phantom airship sightings. And people like explorer Benjamin Trueblood, he went on a polar expedition in 1908, and all the Eskimos were eager to talk to him about these strange craft that had been flying over. They were nothing like aeroplanes, and they kept diving into the sea. Now that's 1908. So maybe when we say we've searched the whole Earth looking for alien life, people in America believe it is all over America. Some of the more specialized scientists believe that we are the offspring of the alien, and others say the place that we don't look is the Arctic and the Antarctic because it's too cold, the waters are too deep. And yet, here is a range of photographs captured by an American submarine underwater, under freezing water. Why were they there? What were they doing? And are they going to come back again?
Alan Robson with you. As you can tell, I moved out of the city a ways. There is a road about 150 yards to my left, and I've come out here where there's nobody, absolutely nobody for miles on end. There's no houses, there aren't any towns or villages or cities. There are vast areas of planet Earth where there is literally nothing. And I've come here because the most common thing that people say when you talk about aliens is, why haven't they just landed on the White House lawn, popped out, said what they had to say so that we can all understand it? Well, one reason might be if they've watched this planet over the centuries and maybe over the millennia, because we think aliens were on this planet probably millions of years ago. But if they've watched how our so-called civilization has grown to be what it is, and they're seeing people in the Middle East strapping bombs to chickens, they may be justified in thinking that this belligerent, disunited, miserable, pathetic planet would have convinced anybody looking at it that maybe we'll stop on the next planet, we're not going to hang around here. I mean, joking aside, I asked somebody at one of the museums in America, I said, what happens if they were to land downtown in the middle of somewhere like New Orleans? And jokingly said, he'd probably get mugged. Well, I mean, the bottom line is there's a million reasons why they would not want people universally to know what they're doing. Now, if they have interbred over the centuries, if we are those aliens, if we are related somehow with a genetic strand that doesn't just go through us and all of our ancestors, but it cuts across time and space. Well, that's a different matter altogether. Now, you could say, are we entitled to know the truth? Could we handle the truth? Especially if somebody said, people running this country are related to aliens, and we are, in fact, dancing to their tune. Would that create civil wars in every country because the people running those countries come from another planet? If we said, well, yes, these people are half alien and half human, would we obey what they said? If we suddenly heard that the President of America is alien and the last 5 have been connected to the whole alien strand, would we still go along with it? If we believed our royal family were, and a lot of people say they are. The thing is, what we have to do now is face up to a brand new world. A world that's completely changing. We're going to be, whether we like it or not, I think in years to come, we're going to be thrust into outer space. We're going to see things and hear things from outer space. We're going to find out that people from other planets have not just visited here, but they've visited other planets, if not in our solar system, nearby. And the mistake maybe that we've made all along is we've just tried to look after ourselves. So that means that people on other planets die, they starve, they get wiped out and massacred. When in fact what we should be doing for a planet that's only small is defend it and look after all of it. And we haven't done that. We deal now not of things just of this world alone, but now we're talking about people from other planets too. Now, does this mean the reason that we haven't had that direct contact, although presidents have spoken to aliens, I'll be telling you more about that later on, but why it isn't out in the open may well simply be, and this is not a mystery of the great universe, that people always want to divide. Instead of pulling everybody together and being one, there's always conflict between 2 different types. And imagine if the 2 different types are the human race and those that came and were bred from other galaxies. I think we're still being misled. And until we all wake up to the fact that a lot of the information that we're given is BS, profound knowledge is being held by a few people who are reverse engineering and coming up with amazing inventions. Where do you think they got them from? They just thought them up in their head? Or do you think a greater intelligence is behind it? Alan Robson, in the Mexican desert, for the Night Owls.
This is Alien Jesus.
Night Owls goes in search of the truth. This is Alien Jesus. Close Encounters.
I've got Richard Hoffman, who is the Deputy Director of Investigations from MUFON. MUFON Star Team Manager and Alabama State Director. Blimey, his door must be 3 meters long. We need to ask you some just very clear, straightforward questions. We've seen an awful lot on the internet about people claiming to have secret battles beneath the sand in America and special agents being killed, and we've heard an awful lot of these kind of things. Quite simply, your belief in aliens, yes or no? How certain are you now that you've had 51 years to look into it?
I basically have looked at it from a lot of different angles. I've investigated probably easily 1,000 cases by now.
Right.
To the point where I've, when you're going out in the field and you're actually talking to witnesses and you go look and you dig into it and then you try to research what can you find to account for this, and then you can't find anything and you're scratching your head, you're left with the fact that there's something there. I mean, there's nothing that can explain what the witnesses just got through telling you.
Right.
Or you might find some sort of indications that it was there. You might find physical effects on the ground, and we find physical effects on trees. We find it on the ground. We find it electromagnetic effects. We find microwave kind of radiation backgrounds. We find a whole variety of things. When we begin to go look at it, we say, well, wait a minute, there's nothing that I know that could produce that.
Right.
And so over the years, you start to find out it's a worldwide phenomena. It's been seen in every culture on the planet. It's been seen, and they pretty much describe them the same way, very similar. They seem to be silent. They maneuver around. And then you talk with, I gave a lecture to the Air Force on UFOs at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio.
Right.
And I'll have pilots and people who come up and knock at your door and basically tell you that an incredible story, like that their job was to go up in an aircraft and actually film the object and try to see if they could chase it and then bring the film back, and it was like analyzed and they were told to shut up about it. Or you might run across situations where you'll talk to a whole variety of other people about the phenomena, and they tell you, well, I was, on board such and such a ship, and I watched and I saw an object, and in fact the whole crew saw it. That type of thing.
Wow.
And so there's an incredible phenomena out there, very serious phenomena. We don't understand it. We don't really truly understand where it's coming from. There is a lot of evidence out there, even if you look at just the frigging documents that are out there on the internet from the military and the government, you see how seriously it was treated by them. And you say, well, there's something obviously that they found, and just the way that they treat it, and very, very quiet. So, yes, there's something to it. There's incredible cases, and people just have to learn about it and study it like I did and pick up a book and read.
For sure.
You'll find out that there's incredible stuff.
It just seems, though, that if it is as common knowledge as it seems to be, people in the military saying, and how many times have we heard, well, I took it to my superior officer and I didn't hear anything else about it. Everything was kept quiet and hushed up. If it is that kind of common knowledge, it can't frighten us now because we've heard it all before. Why do you think they're keeping all of this under wraps still?
Well, it's the nature of the military. You put something in the military, they're a secret organization, right? It's not like they have any responsibility to tell anybody because it's all for defense purposes. And the nature of the defense is to have an advantage over another person, or a country, another whatever, aggressor. And so the nature of having it in the military is from the very get-go, putting it into a secret classification, and it's going to be used for intelligence purposes. And if you take a look at what every conquering nation has done, what do the militaries do? They take over and they find out what technology that there is. They strip it, they use it for themselves, and then they take it from there. So what would be the logical conclusion is, they've been looking to figure out how that they can build them, use the technology to advance their purposes. So you see stealth technology coming up. You see aircraft now designed that are starting to look like, unusual shaped objects that are pretty much, like them.
Right.
And you start to see, invisibility tests and everything else. So, that's what you've got. You've got basically us using it in the military for our purposes and then wanting to play it all down and keep it shush-hush. And what military wants to say that they're not in control of their sky?
You can go back through some sensational films that have been made about it, but one that kind of struck a chord with a lot of people in Britain was Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where an awful lot of people said something like that happened to me here in Britain. And I know in America you've got this amazing number of people who claim to have either been abducted by aliens or pursued by aliens or whatever. Have you met anybody that you are pretty certain is absolutely telling the truth who's had such an experience?
Oh, sure. There's quite a number of very, very solid cases where you've got additional evidence that supports and backs up their story. For example, even if you look at Betty and Barney Hill case in 1961, which kind of triggered a lot of the fuel for the abduction scenario. Well, you've got radar of tracking of an object at the time. You've got the physical evidence in the form of things like torn dress, and you've got shoes that are scuffed, and you've got some interesting. And so we have cases like that where you've got additional supportive evidence. There's a gentleman by the name of Tom Reed, for example, out of Kentucky, and his case, along with his brother, and actually his whole family, have been abducted. And there's a lot of background testimony and evidence that supports the story.
Right.
And so, yes, and I investigated, there was a case up in Kentucky many, many years ago that was involving 3 women the whole car was like lifted up into the object, and you go through and you actually do the check independently on them and their story, and you start to find out that there's something to it.
Here in Britain, we've got some very famous stories that have that proof attached to them, the burning of trees and markings on the ground and captured on radar, chased by aeroplanes. Why is it then that governments internationally, instead of saying, look, if we find an alien plane, we're going to reverse technology it, we're going to scrape all of the info that we can make use of, they are out there, it's not that common that you'll see them necessarily, but they are there, we're not alone in the universe. You don't have to be a military man keeping a secret to at least admit that, but they never have.
Yeah, and again, I think it goes back to there early on decisions that were made to basically. Let me give you an example. In the United States, and I'm sure that similar thing for Britain. There are a lot of times that they compare notes. I'm sure between militaries and so on and so forth. If you look at the Freedom of Information Act, all countries use that as a means of being able to control their data, right? Mm-hmm. So they're released.
Right.
So ultimately what you have is that early on there was obviously an awareness that these things outmaneuver us, that they're in fact, there was a policy that the Air Force had here where it was initially shoot them out of the skies, we don't know what they are, get them down, and then there was a sudden change in that policy to revert to don't shoot but intercept. Then you start to find out that, well, obviously, if you take a look at all the encounters where we fired on them, the bullets basically just were absorbed or something like that. They looked as though that they were having no effect of the craft. They were like it was going into a field, and then somehow the field around it was disrupting the bullets maneuver.
Right.
Anyway, the bottom line is that there's some sort of technology that allows them to deflect or absorb the bullets and stuff.
Wow.
So we can't shoot them. They maneuver faster than us. We've studied it. We've looked at them. We've set up planes and taken photographs of them. There are definitely technologies way beyond us. If there's any kind of crashes that happen, obviously we also would know that too, right?
Sure.
So the bottom line is that the story is that it's in the military. We need to figure it out. We need to keep quiet about it. We're not going to talk about it.
Mm.
And then you look at even in 1953. You have a CIA Robson panel report that basically said, look, the public is getting too wound up about UFOs. We need to calm them down. We need to use the media to be able to help to do it. We need to be able to get a consistent story. We need to work to close the Project Blue Book so that we show that there's nothing to this phenomena.
Mm.
And so governments started moving toward that type of strategy. Let's keep it quiet. Let's shut up about it. Well, let's dismiss it because we don't want that. In fact, if you look at in the United States here, you start to see that the CIA infiltrated these things called tabloids, and we're starting to make it look like they need to mock them. They would show pictures of aliens shaking hands with President Carter or or something of that nature. So there was a whole movement to be able to shut it down, keep people distracted. There's been probably psyops operations that are basically out trying to dissuade and make it look like it's a joke and there's nothing to it.
Yeah.
And all the while to keep the whole thing secret and to keep it, in the background and to get it off of the conscious minds of the general public. And yet here are phenomena that everybody sees and report consistently. And apparently, if you look at their behavior, they don't tend to be hostile because they had plenty of opportunity over centuries to do that, right?
Sure.
So there's an observation. So there's some sort of an agreement. We monitor them, we track them, we see them on the planet. We know that they're there. We're probably, the intel worlds are out there tracking them. There's nothing that they can do about it. They've tried to do something about it. They've decided to let them be, and here we are. And so of like what I see after my 51 years. Is just that we just accept them. They're there. They don't seem to be doing too much harm to people.
Dulce, New Mexico, March 24th, 1978. Cattle rancher Manuel Gomez finds the dead carcass of an 11-month-old bull. But the condition of the calf's body is something he has never experienced before. The animal's sex organs have been removed with a precision beyond modern capabilities. Blood samples taken at the scene are an unusual shade of light pink and refuse to clot. The remains are sent to a lab in Los Alamos for autopsy. The final police report notes that both the liver and heart were mushy. It concludes that a probable explanation for the pinkish blood is a control type of radiation used to kill the animal. Who would commit such a bizarre crime?
Alan Robson with you now. I'm on the main roundabout here next to Hexham. If I turn left, I go down into Hexham over the bridge, over the river, and into the town itself. If I turn right, I go heading up to a lot of the small, beautiful villages that there are around here. And why am I here? Well, it's because slap bang in the middle of the northeast of England, cattle rippings happened. There was a whole spate of them in the 1970s where farmers would wake up in the morning, they'd come down to the fields and they'd find that half a dozen of their cows were down on the ground and some of their internal organs had been removed. Now, at first they thought, surely, how desperate are butchers to want to come and get the kidneys of a cow or the spleen or the heart or the lungs. But these were not done by a butcher. They were not hacked open. They were killed. And people didn't take the cows for an autopsy, but they died, and nobody knows how they died. And then they were ripped wide open, and yet meticulously done, as if being done by a scalpel, not by a butcher's cleaver. And particular parts of their bodies were removed. Now, in some cases, it was things that they believed were tumours and health issues with the animals. Now, were aliens trying to help vets by improving their knowledge? I don't know. But all of these things are commonplace across planet Earth. Here in the Hexham area, 7 different farmers all had the same experience with cattle, with sheep, with pigs, with goats, and even a couple of horses. And yet, wherever you go, all over planet Earth, we get stories of people seeing a craft landing and animals lying there. A lady called Mrs. King lived in Peoana in the USA. It's near Colorado. And what struck her about the corpse of the animal was that the head and neck had been stripped clean of flesh, while the rest of the carcass was untouched. Now, this woman, professional farmer for 30 years, she'd seen livestock killed by dogs. She'd even seen livestock taken by mountain lions. However, this was not the pattern. Even more surprising, she took the corpse to a local vet, and the brain, the entire spinal column, and intestines were missing. Now, this spread all over the place, and between 1971 right up to the present date, we're still getting stories of injuries to animals. A steer found dead with bizarre injuries to the head and hindquarters. The wounds had not bled. Some of them had been cauterized with extreme heat. Who does this? If you're some kind of bloodthirsty weirdo, who does this kind of stuff? Another one, a horse, where the animal's throat had been cut and its sex organs completely removed. Again, all of the wounds cauterized by immense heat. The Cash family, they were farmers. This is going back to 1980, and they lived in New Caney, Texas. and they saw a craft hovering over trees, and they thought, oh, I wonder what that is. The following morning, the local farmer, finding a whole range of animals, ripped, mutilated, but more importantly, all the wounds cauterized, all of them sealed, and various parts of their bodies missing. Is this exactly what our scientists and doctors did way back to practice on animals' innards before they turned their attention to stealing them from humans? Makes you shudder at the thought.
The truth is out there. The sightings are real. This is Alien Jesus.
We worked till almost dark, and we loaded up our equipment. We're headed out of there. And there's 7 of us in the truck. We're driving along, and we hadn't gone very far. And we saw this glow coming through the trees, and we saw this object hovering there, and it was unmistakable. As soon as I straightened up, bam! I just felt this shock. It was kind of like an electric shock, actually, but I just blacked out. My first memory after blacking out was I was regaining consciousness very slowly. The instant that I saw these creatures and realized where I was, I just went crazy with fear. They had these huge eyes that just seemed to look right into me in this really unbearable way.
It's the Night Owls, Alan Robson with you, and having a look at just a flood of information. First of all, when somebody says they've seen a UFO, you want to know certain things. First of all, you want to know, is that person sober? Is he on drugs? And if they are, you say, you got a fair chance that they've seen something. However, the more trustworthy that person is, the better a depiction you'll get. So you want somebody who's out at night, used to seeing what night is, and maybe in a position of authority. And it's stunning just how many police officers have witnessed UFOs, and not just UFOs, but been damaged by UFOs. In 1978, Sergeant Tony Dodd and a police constable called Alan Dale were driving near Connolly, near Skipton in Yorkshire, our part of the world. They were just doing their duty as normal. He says, we're going down a country lane, and you know what it's like up there. It was really, really dark, and the only light you've got's in your police car headlights. Suddenly, the road in front of us lit up. Of course, the immediate reaction, where's the light coming from? But it was coming from directly above. We didn't have police helicopters or anything with the super spotlights. We stopped the car, we got out. This thing was coming from our right to our left. The object was about 100 feet away, moving at about 40 miles an hour, glowing with a bright white incandescent glow, and it came right over our heads. Sergeant Dodd said this. The whole police car was glowing. It was as if the metal of what this thing was white hot. And there were these 3 great spheres underneath, like huge ball bearings, 3 of them equally placed around it. There was a hollow area underneath, almost like a skirting, and those ball things protruded underneath. It was awe-inspiring. I don't know how to explain it to you. It was such a beautiful-looking thing. It had what looked to be like portholes around the dome, an elongated domed area, and what stood out more than anything else was the coloured lights dancing round the outside of the skirt at the bottom. This gave the visual impression that it was rotating. Now, whether the thing was going round and giving that impression, I don't know. I would say it was the lights going round, because when you were looking at the portholes, they didn't seem to move in a circle like you would expect. When the thing passed over our heads and the police car started cooling off, it went into the distance and then suddenly appeared to come down. Now, there's a big wood to the right on a distant hillside. It appeared to go down in that wood. We carried on along the road, and when we got towards the village, we could see lights coming towards us from another direction. It was another police car. We stopped and we said, just been watching a damn great UFO, and it's come down somewhere here. The other police car, we expected not to believe us, but they seemed to gulp because they had seen it too. Now, 4 police officers all saw the same thing in 2 separate police cars. We've got stories about Yorkshire again. Todmorden, a policeman by the name of Alan Godfrey, was abducted. He said, I was driving a police car at the time, and in the early hours of the morning, I came across what I thought at the time was a bus that had slid across the road sideways. When I approached the object, I got within 20 yards of it and immediately came across what I have to describe as a UFO. It was about 20 feet wide and 14 feet high, diamond-shaped. It had a bank of windows in, and the bottom half seemed to be rotating. The police blue beacon was bouncing back off it, as were my headlights. It was hovering off the ground about 5 feet and was very, very frightening. Now, when he was asked on television what had happened, and he says, nothing happened for about 12 months. And then, due to publicity, everybody seemed to want to find out what my story was. Now, he tried to ring in for help. He tried his radio. Nothing was working. He drove back to the centre of town where he picked up a colleague, gave him some brief details, took him to the site where both policemen noticed the road above that had the object on it was really totally dry in patches, everywhere else completely soaked with the rain. Returning to the police station, Godfrey saw that the time was 5:30, and he found puzzling because that was less time had elapsed, not more. Later it transpired there was a time lapse. There was a missing 1 hour, 40 minutes in his day that he couldn't account for. He believes absolutely he was taken on board that ship. And who knows what happened to him, because his mind was clean and he was sent back with no knowledge of it at all. Final story I've got from Lewes in Sussex about Patricia Grant, who interviewed a female police constable. And she saw a strange floating object. And as it came closer, light greenish grey metal with a reflective surface, dense black circular sections, and it landed in front of her within 50 feet. This police woman refused to write it down on her reports because she knew the mickey would be taken out of her because she was new and fresh and only a woman. And back in 1977, she said she wouldn't have been able to cope continuing to work at a police station with all of the stick that she would have got. And yet now, people are beginning to understand that these things that were common back in the 70s, are even more common now. Now we're going to cut over to Union City in California, where we find Ruben Uriarte, who is a UFO researcher. He's been involved in television programs up the kazoo. He knows everything about everything. We need to talk to this man. Hello, Ruben. We're talking about contact between human beings and aliens. Now, you've done some shows about ancient aliens. How confident are you that we as a species have not directly just witnessed these things, but actively interacted with them?
Well, that's a real good question, and I think a lot of it has to do with the archives or any of the historical records one could find in terms of either through archaeology or anthropology or through documents, and it could go way back. And then evaluating some of these reports that were often documented by witnesses who claim to have seen these objects and then later have depicted or have indicated that they have had actual contact So over the years, there's been a number of researchers that have been focusing on various aspects of this contact phenomenon. And so right now, currently, the way we are understanding the phenomena of contact is either through folks or those folks that or people who've had the abduction, or at the same time there are those with that called close encounters of the fifth kind, which is a basically where people will either try to communicate with them and or they will establish communication with people. And then the other aspect of it is the encounters that our military personnel may have had in terms of over the years. One of the things that both my co-author and I'm also written several books on crash retrievals, and these crash retrievals we've been focusing on the U.S.-Mexican border.
Right.
And there's been several cases where some personnel have actually found the bodies. Of course, we're going back to the Roswell.
Mm-hmm. And when you look back, though, when you actually go around museums, like in Mexico, those dishes that they've found with actual aliens painted onto gold dishes that are in spacesuits, and that's from 500 years BC, some of these things. The more you see, the more obvious that it was. Why do you think that people haven't taken it seriously up until now?
Well, I believe a lot has to do with our technology. Now that we have the internet, now that we have cable TV and a number of other networks, a lot radio shows, as well as YouTube, and that I think just that the fact that the technology has had a major influence on in informing our society.
It just needed people to ask questions. I just don't know why people hadn't asked questions right from the very beginning, because the implications here would have changed every religion on planet Earth.
I am in contact with several people that I know that have possessions of these stones. They have these remarkable depictions of people or aliens are in contact with people through these stone artifacts. I mean, all the history is written on these stones.
Right.
And they're engraved, and it's amazing. And so there's a number of these rocks that are being discovered. The problem is that a lot of the mainstream archaeologists and other scientists don't want to touch it because the fact that it's, they're concerned about their reputations, their jobs, and that.
Sure.
I think that's slowly changing.
Out of all of the people that you've met, because I know how thorough your investigations are, because, you've done shows like UFO Files, UFO Hunters, Ancient Aliens, you've done all of these things. Out of all of the people that you've met, because realistically, we only need one story of alien contact to be true, and aliens are real, instantly. Has there been one story that you just knew this guy or this woman was telling you what she'd experienced and it was real?
The one that really has always fascinated me has been the case of Mr. Carlos de los Santos, who was a pilot who was driving a small private plane back in May of 1975. And his plane was surrounded by three UFOs. And this gentleman, the pilot, was calling out Mayday, 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 and the entire recording as well as the objects were being tracked by the radar systems at the Mexico City airport. So we have evidence of that as well as his actual Mayday call. He said he had no control of his plane for approximately 18 minutes. These objects were raising his plane to a higher altitude with him having no control, and his biggest fear was his cockpit or his cabin was not pressurized.
Right.
So he thought he was going to die for lack of oxygen, but fortunately they released the plane. And the reason why I bring that case up is because 8 months earlier, in August of 1974, there was a report of a small plane that would collide it with a UFO, and this is happened over the area of Mexico, over the northern part. So, when you start looking for obviously a connection there,
yeah,
and in some other cases where we've been finding other crash retrievals, there's evidence that's basically pointed out in a document by witnesses saying that they've seen dead aliens inside the craft. What amazes me the most is that it's the same description,
right?
Same experiences for people from all over the parts of the world. I found that true when I was in the UK, or I was in Mexico or Puerto Rico. Just that the people's experiences, and these are people who do not know each other, obviously.
Right.
They're saying almost the same identical thing.
This is Alien Jesus 4 on Night Owls.
Alan Robson with you for the Night Owls. Now, I told you we were going to be zipping all over the world. We've been lucky over the past few years to pop up pretty much everywhere. And at the present moment, I'm standing by the banks of Loch Ness. Little bit of rain, little bit of thunder in the background, as you can probably hear over the mountains. Doesn't rain here very much. It's a protected climate around the loch. However, it was in conditions exactly the same as this that a couple of people visiting Loch Ness, their names Alan and Anna Betts, were on holiday here with their parents. And Mrs. Betts' mother, Tatiana, took a picture of the loch during a rain shower. And she was saying to her family, even when it's raining, isn't this one of the most beautiful places on earth? And there, slap bang in the middle of her photograph, are two craft, two huge saucer-shaped crafts with a strange tail behind them, and the two of them soaring over the huge expanse of water. Remember, there's more water in Loch Ness than all of the lakes in Ireland, Wales, Scotland and England all together, and it's deeper, 4 times deeper than the sea. So, a lot of water here. The family who come from our part of the world, they're from York, they were staying at a holiday cottage very, very close. Well, we visited Urquhart Castle as well, you know. Now, Mrs. Betts is a director of a refrigeration company based in Bradford. And Mr. Betts said he was very sceptical about UFOs, but he absolutely can't find any explanation for this picture. He said our dog, Akita, Yuka, was strangely unsettled by the sight. He never barks, but I remember we were laughing at the time, saying that he'd seen Nessie because he was looking outside from the cottage window and barking at the sky. Now, at that time, we couldn't see anything. We'd been very lucky with the weather, and we were stunned with the view that we saw. It was almost constant sunshine, and then, all of a sudden, the weather changed, as if something had changed the weather, almost so that it's heavy rain to distract you from what you were seeing in the sky. We'd never had a change in weather that quickly before. And after the holiday, we were looking through the pictures on our PC because they were taken on a digital camera. And on the screen, the resolution was better than obviously on the small camera screen. And we saw these objects. When we zoomed in, we were completely shocked. I can't offer any logical explanation. I'm probably one of the most skeptical people that anybody's likely to meet. But we showed the pictures to Anna's parents, and they were as shocked as we were. And her dad is probably even more skeptical than I am. When you see the pictures, you will see that there is also something in the loch, almost as if it's interreacting. It looks almost like a periscope coming out of the loch, communicating with two craft flying above this amazing body of water. I love it up here. It's amazing, and the private little weather system that it has means it's nearly always sunny. And yet, what would it take to change weather instantly? It's hot, it's beautiful, it's raining. Could that be two huge craft battling and pushing its way through a rain cloud? Would that be enough to do it? Because we're talking even more now about UFOs underwater. And as the bottom of Loch Ness is 4 or 5 times deeper than the sea, we're better to hide a craft. And if there was something going over it, maybe monitoring the sea floor, who's to say they wouldn't mistake it for just some huge flat anomaly? And it's weird because ever since we got up here, everybody's talking about UFOs again. They found one hovering over the beach in Cornwall, a strange triangular object over the beach in Bude, a 3-pointed object hovering above the beach next to a seaside resort. A lot of people thought it could be a drone or a fighter sent out to intercept planes. Other people said it was a huge, giant, remote-controlled seagull. I don't think so. However, the weird thing is, a lot of photographs were taken. The craft is up there in the sky in the top right corner of the photograph I'm looking at now. Some people said, could it be a Russian plane? Could it be somebody invading our space? However, when you look in and zoom in on this picture, it's a flying saucer. Now, bottom line is, half a dozen people who live in Bude say, we see them all the time. They come out of the sea. So is that what we're missing? And if you remember, not so very long ago, once again up near Scandinavia, there was a great deal of talk because something had smashed through the bottom end of a glacier. Now, you know yourself, glaciers, super tough, and yet something had hit it with such a force that a lot of the ice had broken off. Now, when they went up there to examine it, they sent divers down, and the divers could see something that looked exactly like a spacecraft sticking into the bottom of the sea. They don't know what it was, but because of its proximity to the glacier, it was beginning to ice up. It was beginning to freeze up. By now, it's completely covered in ice. Now, I remember a film, I think it was called The Thing, where there was something lost in the ice. Is it real? Has it happened? Is that where the story came from? Fascinating. At the present moment, I'm staring at the mountains surrounding this incredible loch. And we've come here so many times hoping to be able to identify the Loch Ness Monster that people in recent days have said, the guy who lives here says it's a big catfish. When we were there, we thought a catfish is one of the only things that had a mouth big enough to take bites out of the ham, the huge racks of ham that we left at Lochside. There's a lot of things that could be the monster. But the one thing we've never thought, could the monster actually be an alien? Or aliens? And maybe the reason we can't find them is they're in a craft deep, deep, deep below Loch Ness. Alan Robson, Alien Jesus 4. I'm going to send you back in time. Do you remember when we visited Turkey? We had a week broadcasting live from Istanbul. And when we were there, we visited something that is inexplicable to any skeptic. Derinkuyu Underground City in Cappadocia. What a time we had. Here's a clip. The present moment, I've just moved inside the Derinkuyu Underground City in Cappadocia, Turkey. An ancient, multi-level underground city extending to a depth of almost 60 meters, and yet it spreads over acres, hundreds of square acres in all directions. Big enough to shelter between 20 and 30,000 people, together with their livestock and food stores. And yet, more recently, it's been thought of as the place, the impossible place. A place built at a time when there were no human beings on planet Earth. Now you walk down long passages like this one, and you see it as you go. It's kind of sandy, dusty, and when you put your foot down in it, just a cloud of dust. Don't know whether you can hear it. It doesn't sound like the stone that it is, because it's soft stone. And the walls, if you rub the walls, once again you get a fine film, a cloud of red dust. Oh, don't want to do too much of that. It was open to the visitors. Anybody that wanted to come round about 1969 when it was rediscovered. And yet, half of the city is still inaccessible. You're not able to get there. Each floor could be closed off with these huge, heavy doors. Massively, massively heavy doors that you just physically, they're made of stone, and you really can't get past them. They're big, heavy stone doors, and they're circular. And what they actually do is they open by turning in onto the corridor and filling the whole corridor so nobody can get past. As I say, there used to be things down here like oil presses, stables, cellars, storage rooms that they thought were maybe to do with religion, but nobody was quite sure. And unique to the Derinkuyu complex, on the second floor, a huge spacious room with a barrel-vaulted ceiling. Some people say that it could well have been used in the past as a school, and obviously theologians of various religious ilks have said, well, it was obviously a Muslim school, it was obviously a Christian school, it was obviously a da-da-da-da-da. There's no proof it was a school at all, but it's an enormous room. It looks like a planning room. The nearest thing it looks like to me is the kind of room that Churchill had beneath London during World War II, a room where you had small side rooms where you could sleep. You had other rooms where you could talk about stuff. And between the third and fourth levels, there's a vertical staircase. Now, this is not stairs that go off to the side. They go straight up, and you have to climb them. And the steps in between each stair is further than it's comfortable for a human to step. The gaps in between were made for people sized 7 and 8 feet tall. Who built this place? Who built it? They're carved out of unique geological formations. They may well have been used as hiding places during times of raids over the years. Many of those locations are now kind of archaeological tourist attractions. They remain genuinely and generally unoccupied. In excess of 200 underground cities containing a minimum of 2 levels have been discovered in the area between Kayseri and Nevşehir. 40 of them contain a minimum of 3 levels down into the earth. The cities of Kaymakli and Derinkuyu are the 2 best examples of habitable underground structures. There's others ticking around, and as I look, you can see rooms carved out of it, and with, instead of glass windows there, just an opening so you can see into the next room. But again, the question still remains. If human beings didn't build this, who did? And yet, the one thing that I noticed on the way in to this temple, and you know we went to a previous temple, the 2 things they have in common is the outside has been pretty much utterly destroyed. There's marks of devastation, where huge explosions, almost of a volcanic size, have taken place. And this adds fuel to the fact that maybe those 2 gods came together. Aliens who both wanted what the earth had to offer. And they fought one another, not on the ground, but in the sky. And the only place where these aliens could be safe, where maybe they are now, dotted across planet Earth, below the ground, in the crust, in the surface of our planet. Yet remember two things. The Bible, the Quran, and the Talmud, three of the oldest holy books, all say that people from the stars bred with man. So first of all, we are the aliens. Secondly, alien cultures fought over this place. This part of the world had aliens swooping in crafts far before we were ever able to do that, far before we were on the planet, to try and wipe each other out using technology of the sort we have now. But we weren't even on the planet to throw a stick, to chuck a stone back then. We hadn't even been born. So just remember, when you hear the next story of, oh, well, we were told that 400,000 years ago there was no humans on the planet, but they've just found footprints in a riverbed, or they've just found tools made that only a human hand could make. It's quite spooky walking along the corridors and not being able to hear your footprints, and to see shadows on the walls and little things carved into rocks that look like star systems. Star systems that no man could ever possibly know about. If you look outside, the one thing that all of these places have in common is something has tried to destroy the surface of the planet. Something from above, carrying great power, has tried to wipe these places out. Yet when you're inside them, you must have felt absolutely safe. 50 meters from the surface. What could hurt you? Even using modern weapons today, you'd feel pretty safe from almost every kind of weapon. And yet, this could be the place where the very first space battle took place. Because nothing can move the kind of like 60, 70, 80 tons of rock and earth. Nobody on the planet had the capability to build it, even if they were on the planet at the time, and they weren't. So I am now, maybe for the first time properly in my life, I'm in a building made by spacemen. There's no other explanation for it. It sounds incredibly far-fetched, and yet there's no other way it could possibly be. And as you go, you can kind of look down. I'm standing beside that staircase, and the staircase goes down almost 50 meters, 45 meters. And I couldn't climb up this. The first step is about 4 foot off the ground. Now think, how are you going to get your foot on that 4 foot? If you're a ballet dancer, you might be able to do it. But then the next one's 8 foot off the ground. How tall do you have to be able to walk upstairs of this sort? It's impossible.
Alan Robson speaks to real-life abductees. This is Alien Jesus, Close Encounters.
Talking about the whole idea of alien intervention in the lives of ordinary people, the person you've got to talk to is Sue Farrell. How did this happen to you? What were you doing? Where were you? What occurred?
It's a right funny carry on, because I've always been a little bit interested in paranormal and spaceships, but not that much interested. Now my interest has sprung up again when I actually took a photograph of one of my grandchildren's birthday party.
Right.
And when I developed the film and put it up on the PC, there were a UFO. It either had been caught in the shutter speed, or it were there, and obviously we didn't see it with his eyes.
Right.
Now, it made the local paper, so it sort of sprung my interest up a little bit more about it. So I started getting my equipment and going up into attic and sort of taking random films and pictures, and I was absolutely astonished what were coming back. Anyway, it sort of progressed on, and there were, some amazing footage and pictures I captured.
Right.
And then one night, I came in from work and did the usual thing. My husband were working away, run my bath and everything. And I had this compulsion to just sit down on the bed. So I sat down on the bed and laid down. And the next thing I knew, there were these small creatures came through my bedroom window. And they came to the side of me. I must admit, I was absolutely terrified.
Through the window, actually physically through the glass, or was the window open?
Yeah, no, it was shut. They sort of were able to come through, a bit like a ghost could go through a wall.
Right, okay.
And I remember being absolutely petrified, although I couldn't move, I just laid on the bed. And I'd left my bath and everything just as it was, so I could get into it.
Right.
And anyway, they came to the side of me. They were little tiny small creatures with either black skin or black suits, I don't know, right tiny little thin arms.
Right.
Now the face was obscured. It was a bit like, the Terminator where it goes to liquid.
Yes.
It was a bit like that, this sort of movement in the face. Anyway, they came to the side of the bed and they put what felt like an invisible veil, a silk over me. And when they pulled this silk, I could feel it sort of coming away from me, but all my fears disappeared with it. Then they put this sort of, what I can describe as cling film mask on my face. And I wasn't frightened because they'd done this silk thing previous, so I'd got no fear.
Right.
The next news, I'm stood out in space with them in this craft that were like being inside of a bubble. And all the colours of this craft, although it was see-through, it was just like when you blow a bubble and it's all iridescent and different coloured. And what I couldn't get my head round was I could actually see these alien-type people behind me, although I were looking forward at Earth, because they were showing me Earth, and we were absolutely in awe with it. But my human mind was still really active and thinking, well, hang on a minute, I'm looking at Earth, but why can I see them too behind me?
Right, yes.
Everything were done in telepathy. You didn't have to speak at all. It were all telepathic.
Were you threatened by these creatures? I know you said that they had this way of kind of calming you down.
Yeah.
To suddenly find yourself, A, aliens, B, suddenly you're in space. Were you not in blind terror?
No, because they'd done, like I said, they'd done something to me where I just felt like I was at home with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I was calm. I wasn't freaking out or anything. I was still, obviously, my human mind was still working, obviously, to know that I could see all the way around and I shouldn't be able to do that. But it's as if they were feeling my emotions. I never thought of any of my grandchildren or my sons or anything like that, which I'm really close to.
Sure.
There were none of that at all. It was just living for that moment and what was happening with them.
Right, so how did you get back from that? Was that the most that happened to you there?
Yeah, from what I can remember, I've actually thought about going for a bit of total regression because there might be some more in there that I don't know about.
Right.
But they sort of, when I was feeling really, when my heart sank when I looked at what had happened on Earth, it was smaller than me and it put its hand, and I had to smile to myself because its fingers, it had a long finger in the middle, and my first thoughts were, well, they didn't get it wrong with E.T., with the long finger. Because I thought, well, it's like E.T.'s hand.
Right.
And it just put its hand above onto my shoulder and telepathically said to me, you'll be okay. And then next news, I'm back on my bed. Anyway, there were bits coming back and I tried to get up and I couldn't. I was so weak and nauseous and sick. I actually staggered over to about 4 o'clock in the morning this. My bath was still there, my towels were still there, everything. Even when I've had a night out on Lash, I've always managed to get in bed and get undressed. I was absolutely fully dressed.
Good girl.
When I was digging around, I found out that there were another girl at the same time just over the valley where I live had also had an abduction at the same time.
Right.
Very, very similar circumstances. I actually went to town and met her in the coffee shop to have a chat. And with 2 crop circles turned up in our town at the same time the abductions took place, which has never ever happened before, not ever.
Right.
And they are on YouTube if anybody wants to check it up, Huddersfield Crop Circles. And there were a massive influx of UFO sightings. There's a guy at the end of the road, you could time your watch by him. Every night at 12 o'clock he came out of his gate, got on his scooter and went to put his grandma to bed.
Right.
And he came across and he said he didn't know what had happened, and he came across, he would talk to my husband, and he says, oh, you better tell her. And when he came across, he said, oh, Sue, he says, other night when I came out to put Grandma to bed, he said, there was something above your house, he says, and I didn't move, he says, I was petrified. He says, it was just like a great big glowing golden ball.
Right.
And it was over your house. He's got a perfect view of my house, only 3 doors away.
Right.
And so I've also had it verified by other people.
Why you, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I've also looked into DNA and blood groups. Now, it seems to be a lot of abductees have got the RHD or the RHB negative blood.
Right.
I'm also of that blood group. Could it be something to do with that? What that means is our blood's universal. We can give our blood to anybody, but we can only receive it back from our own kind.
Right, yes.
It cannot be traced to anything linked on Earth, like the rest of the people can be linked to the rhesus monkey. We cannot.
So you think that they need a transfusion and they've got your house on their list?
Well, I don't think it's a transfusion. I think it's something to do with the blood group, because if we can't be linked to anything on Earth, then obviously we could be something to do with early experimentation with their DNA.
Right.
You know, it's a possibility. There's so many possibilities.
But you have no doubt that this actually happened to you, because...
Oh, I've no doubts at all.
Because, you know, when you talk about the... even when I'm on the lash, I could come in and still get up the next morning and something like we do, you know, as a species.
I've never gone to bed yet with my boots and fully clothed and slept on top of the bed, ever. I mean, I hadn't even been out or working. I run my own cafe.
Right.
So, you know, it was early mornings, etc., etc.
So you'd be used to it.
There was absolutely no reason. I am absolutely, totally convinced it happened. Going back, like when I was a child, when my firstborn were born, that's when I first saw my first UFO.
Right.
And when I trotted round to see my mother and tell her what I'd seen, she said, that's really funny, she said, because you were born in 58. She says, and I saw the same thing when you were born.
Wow.
It was just like a round silver sphere.
Could this be, because, you know, people talk about how maybe aliens interceded into Earth millions of years ago, and then they came back from time to time to give us the opportunity to share some of their knowledge and intelligence, and you get a glut of amazing inventions coming out.
Yeah.
And they say that they may well have bred with us. Do you think you could be in a long line of people?
Yeah, maybe, because they say that they stick with a certain type of family, be it blood group or whatever.
So they're keeping an eye on you still?
Well, yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter where I go or what pictures I take. I mean, we went off last year to France, to Normandy, and on 2 photographs there's a craft just sitting in sky on 2 different occasions. We went to Scarborough with grandchildren, and there's one following the open air bus. And they just seem to be wherever
you are.
I haven't figured out what they want. I'm trying. I'm trying my best to try and figure out what their interest is in me.
It may just be that you're one of them.
Well, they say that the blood groups or DNA, if you can't be linked to anything on Earth, then are we? They call them star children, don't they? Are we something to do with that? I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Alan Robson with you here in America. I'm still overlooking the site of Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy it was once called, a place where you could come and bring the kids for a space adventure of many descriptions. Question is, and we asked this kind of before, why aren't we being told? Well, the fact is, governments are hiding aliens from you. Now, I'm not saying this. Paul Hellyer says this. Now, he served as Canada's Defence Minister from 1963 to 1967. And he says that aliens have been visiting our planet for thousands of years. Many walk among us, but it can be difficult to tell them apart. He said most of the media won't touch stories like this because governments talk it down. A former defence minister accusing all of the world leaders of concealing aliens. You just have to keep working away and hope that someday you get a critical mass, he said. The public will say in one way or another, Mr. President or Mr. Prime Minister, we want the truth, and we want it now because it affects our life. Now, Hellier went public with his belief in aliens in 2005. He is one of the first of the highest-ranking politicians to publicly state that aliens are real. He says, we spend far too much time fighting each other, we spend too much money on military expenditure, and not enough on feeding the poor and looking after the homeless and the sick. And he remembers having conversations with high-ranking Russian and American politicians and saying, why don't we tell people the truth? And he says, but they always refused to share their advanced technologies until we change our polluting and warring ways. Now, Paul Hellier has been questioned a lot, and what I've done is put together the crux of what he believes. He says that most aliens come from other star systems, although there are some living on Venus, Mars, and Saturn's moon. There have been 4 species of aliens visiting our planet for thousands of years. There's between 2 and 12 total species of aliens, although some places the number is closer to 80. Some look like humans, while others appear more like creatures portrayed in popular culture. Most alien species have benevolent and good intentions towards humanity, although he feels a handful may have ulterior motives. One alien species, known as the Tall Whites, is working with the US Air Force in Nevada, and they've been known to pass for humans in public. The Federation of Alien Species has vowed not to intervene in human affairs unless they are invited to. The Federation is disappointed in the way humans are treating their own planet. And alien technology is far, far more advanced, but gave us LED lights, microchips, and Kevlar vests. Now, if you think of this, they've vowed not to intervene unless they're invited to, which is exactly what we found in the show about the Illuminati. People on Earth who may well have come from an alien route, they're not going to take over on planet Earth until they're invited to, until all of the religions fail. And we see them failing every day. He gave an interview to a group of college students, and it was kind of like Star Trek. He said this: we have a long history of UFOs, and of course there's been a lot more activity in the last few decades since we invented the atomic bomb. They're very concerned about that, and that we might use it again, because the whole cosmos is a unity, and it affects not just us, but other people out there. They're very much afraid that we might be stupid enough to start using those weapons again. I would say that nearly all are benign and benevolent. They do want to help us, but there's a few species who do not. He said he'd never met an alien, but he did see one near his cabin in Ontario's Lake Muskoka. He described a whole list of the aliens to the young students. And he says they're able to get up dressed as man, sometimes dressed as nuns, and go into cities to shop and aren't detected. Another group of aliens are called short greys with slim arms, slim legs, about 5 feet tall with large heads. And a third group, Nordic blondes. And if you meet one, you'll probably say, I bet she's from Denmark or somewhere, because they've got that amazing Scandinavian blonde look. And Hellier also said that all you have to do if you are seeking proof of aliens is to look at NASA images over the years. They have thousands of UFOs captured. The Mercury Redstone 1A, a satellite on December the 19th, 1960, took a picture out from Earth to the space, and there's a huge capsule made by someone but not man. So in 1960 they knew, they didn't tell us. All these years later, they're still not telling us.
This is Close Encounters on Night Owls.
You with Alan Robson, this is Alien Jesus 4, The Close Encounters. Now, imagine there are more than one way for people to get involved with something from another world. Now, not so very long ago, Dr. Milton Wainwright from the University of Sheffield used balloons to collect samples of dust and particles flying around 16 miles plus up there in the Earth's atmosphere. In one sample, he found a tiny metal ball that had left an impact crater in the collection device. Now, this means it had to be travelling at speed. Now, dust and particles floating around in the atmosphere have no speed at all. And yet, this collection device caught something speeding towards Earth. From where? He has no idea. What if aliens have sent microorganisms to Earth inside these metal balls to create seed life on our planet, sent to Earth by intelligent alien life? He said that a gooey substance was oozing out of this metallic ball, and that the stuff that was coming out of it was biological, it was living. Now, the University of Sheffield and Birmingham and Buckingham say that the ball, which was about the width of a human hair, could be an example of directed panspermia, where life is deliberately sent to Earth by some unknown extraterrestrial civilization. The professor said that the strange material coming from this titanium ball is biological and could be a tiny colony of microorganisms. He did concede it is virtually impossible to prove that this tiny sphere was sent by aliens from outer space. But who created it? Nature could not put something like that in a protected titanium ball. You needed someone or something to physically do it. He said the sphere made an impact crater on the sampler that was attached to the balloon as it collected dust and particles. The sphere made an impact. It was travelling at speed from space when it was captured. Now, we expect huge things coming from space. What if the majority of things that have arrived here in recent years have been tiny? Dr. Wainwright and his team discovered the sphere when examining all those other tiny little samples and using X-ray analysis to examine the sphere. He said it was made from titanium with traces of vanadium, while the material inside, oozing out of it, was a fungus-like knitted mat-like covering. He says it could have been carried to Earth on a comet, or more likely, it could have been sent by an unknown civilization. He published his findings in the Journal of Cosmology, and their conclusions are yet to be corroborated by other scientists. But the journal often publishes papers on astrology and astrobiology. But this is highly, highly contentious. 2 years ago, the same magazine published a paper that claimed to have identified fossils of microbiotic life living on a meteorite. That came with a blaze of publicity and skepticism. The idea that life can survive high in Earth's atmosphere isn't new. Scientists working with NASA have discovered bacteria living up to 5 miles above Earth's surface. But they're earthly bacteria, not from another world. And since this oozing has been found, this is the first one we found. How many more have there been? How many plants growing out there initially began on another world? The Panspermia Hypothesis is a theory that suggests that nature, that life spreads across the known physical universe, hitchhiking on comets or meteorites. Life like extramophils, capable of surviving the inhospitable conditions of space, could get trapped in debris that is ejected into space after collisions between asteroids and planets that harbour life. These life forms may travel dormant for an extended amount of time before colliding randomly with other planets like ours. The idea of directed panspermia, however, that means life forms are deliberately sending things to us here on Earth, intelligent civilizations sending us things that they need to have growing on Earth. Professor Francis Crick, one of the biologists who discovered the structure of DNA, examined this possibility. He and his colleagues said, "We have inadequate evidence at the present time." It's not that that evidence isn't here. It's just it's arriving in titanium containers that burst on impact and allow the seeds to grow wherever they land. Whether you know it or not, we can prove we're surrounded by alien plant life. Now, you can talk as much as you like about maybe there's aliens in that UFO, maybe people have been abducted, maybe. Newspapers and magazines drive me crazy with maybes and ifs and buts. Cut to the quick. Who has seen an alien? Who has been abducted by an alien? And Denise Stoner is that person. Hello, Denise. When you the very first thing that happened to you with respect of the whole alien thing, what was it?
Well, believe it or not, I was only 2.5 years old. I was watching, just lying in bed. I wasn't used to being completely, alone with just one person in the house because both of my grandparents lived with us, Mom and Dad, and here comes this little character, a robed or hooded character, through the wall and came up to me, and he had long sleeves, and the hood was on, and he was carrying what looked like either a tool or a light of some kind, and approached the bed, and I wasn't afraid, I was more curious, and he put his hand out with this tool, and I thought, oh, well, he's another nursery rhyme character. I had just seen that object in the sky, and gestured for me to go with him. So I took his hand, and he had the great big eyes that what we call the Greys have now, and I went with him. And out into the hall we went, and right through the wallpaper.
You went through the wall?
Right through the wall, yeah.
And what did he do with you?
Well, I ended up in, I guess what I realize now was some sort of craft, a room where there were other children. Now, I don't recall what we did, except it was some sort of classroom where we were all having a lesson of some type. We were being taught something.
When you say we all, who else was there?
Other children of several ages. I was not even in school yet. I was just so tiny. And this went on for several years, even to the point where I saw my sister being floated over the top of her crib as a toddler.
Now, when you say this happened for several years, what, they kept coming back nightly, or how did it work?
Well, they kept coming back until now, even, for all different reasons, and then up to a point where my husband and I were taken in broad daylight out of the mountains in Colorado while we were driving.
While you were driving?
While we were driving.
Did you ever find out what happened to your car?
It was floated off the road.
Whoa.
We were floated off the road. We were coming down off a mountain pass to go to our campground. We had driven the area for 2 years.
Uh-huh.
And we were at the top of one pass that we were used to doing in daylight. And my parents and friends were waiting for us at our campground. And there was a big glacier valley below us called South Park Valley. And I was looking down, and I saw a couple of lights off it's like a desert at the bottom. And I couldn't figure out why they were there because it was just big open space. And we came down off that pass down into the flat area. And as we did, we passed one small town. And as about 4 miles outside of that town, the lights started to travel toward us and came over the top of the car. And then I looked up, saw the lights above us, and they were so bright I couldn't see what they were attached to. The car lifted off the road, and I couldn't get my husband to respond. He was staring straight ahead. I could see him hanging onto the wheel. And the car lifted off the road and started to go out across the desert. And it went out all the way across for, several miles, I would say, and then settled down. And then I saw the lights come over the car and land in front of us, and there was a craft. And I was taken aboard the craft. There's 3 hours of missing time.
Right.
When we came to, we were on the other side of the pass.
Wow.
3 hours later, and it's now dark. The headlights have been turned on in the car, the motor is running, and my husband is driving.
Wow.
And back then, we didn't have cell phones.
Sure.
So by the time we reached our campground, and my husband had turned the odometer on in the car, and it hadn't moved.
Right.
So there was no determination as far as how far
traveled.
We had gone, didn't read correctly. So we got to the campground, and my parents were walking down the dirt road toward the ranch house where the caretaker of the ranch, to ask if they could use the only phone available to call the police.
Yes, to see if they could find you. You mentioned, though, that you've had these experiences that continue up to the present day.
Yes.
Presumably then, you will be able to answer a lot of the questions that people keep spouting about alien intervention. First of all, do they talk, or do they talk telepathically?
Telepathically. At least that's what I have to call it. I hear a voice, but I'd have to say it's either behind my head or in my head. And it's very brief, as if giving me instructions or briefly some information.
Like very to the point.
Mm-hmm.
And what?
Yeah.
And okay, describe to us, because you mentioned that they looked like the greys. We've had people discussing the tall greys, the small greys, and a whole host of different types of aliens. How tall was the creature, and explain what it looked like to you? Because you've seen them many times now, I gather.
I have 3 kinds that I call mine. The small grays are the typical gray skin-colored entities, about 3 foot tall, with a great big, large, dark eyes, and I think those are robots.
Right.
Because when I've entered the craft, I've seen them lining the walls, and I call them soldiers, because they don't move, I don't think, unless they're instructed to.
Right.
And they've just been lining the walls of the hallway, just staring straight ahead.
Right.
The taller one looks identical to that, except I have a feeling that they're not at all robots or robotic, because mine is more of an escort, and he can take away fear. I don't know how ageless they are. Some of them I think are very old. And recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, if you put mine in a lineup, like you would in a police lineup where you'd have several criminals, let's say,
yeah.
and mine's definitely not a criminal, I could choose mine. You might not be able to, but I could pick mine out.
Are you saying that they are very humanesque?
Kind of. They don't necessarily have emotions, but as soon as I enter a craft, they're able to take any fear away.
Right. And the third type, you mentioned there was 3 types in your case. What was the third?
The third one is what you would call an insectoid. They could, and I call mine the doctor because he has done any of the medical procedures that I've had done, and very, very intelligent, and he looks like the praying mantis.
He looks like the praying mantis, my goodness, which is
yes.
not the prettiest thing you would like working on your body, I would imagine.
No, very, very tall, and the eyes are, let's say, pointed. The point is towards the sky, one towards the floor. Try to give you an idea.
Right. Yes, yes.
And then the rounded portion is on the sides, left to right, and they blink left to right instead of up and down.
Right. And that alien was always the one carrying out medical procedures. You have the fear removed. What kind of things did that doctor do to you?
Well, it sounds bizarre, but I'm one of several that I think have been in a breeding program when I was younger. Several missing pregnancies where I saw vials of fetuses. And at one point, when I walked by one, looked right at me, and I felt a type of a bonding. I knew that was mine.
You knew that was your fetus, your child?
Yes, yes.
So a breeding program, and were you ever given any knowledge as to what the human fetuses were to be used for?
I think they were a combination of human, of course, and what they were, and they were trying to, I think, improve themselves and attempt to improve us, possibly.
Right.
To make us not so warlike and to make them bring back some of the emotions that they had lost.
The truth is out there. The sightings are real. This is Alien Jesus.
Alan Robson with you from Mexico, and it was in a town very much like this that Julio Platner from Winifreda in Argentina had an amazing experience on the 9th of August 1983, a close encounter of the 5th kind. Platner was driving along one of the dirt roads, exactly like the dirt roads that lead into this town here. They're very, very commonplace in Central and South America. There's nothing on the roads. They're miles away from anything. And ahead of him, he saw a bright bluish light hovering. He stopped his works van, he got out to take a better look at whatever it was, and he was suddenly hit by a beam of brilliant white light, and it dazzled him and it sent him tumbling over and over again. He remembers falling, and then came to lying naked on a hard, flat table in a room with very dim lights. The room was about 3 meters, that's about 10 foot across, with curved walls that glowed slightly, and moving around him, 4 creatures, humanoid creatures, human in shape, though their limbs and bodies were slender and rather elongated. They stood about 4 feet, 1.2 meters tall. They were pale and greyish-white in colour all over. They were not wearing clothes. Now, Platner was not certain if they were naked or if they were dressed in really super tight clothes, but he told people later on that it was definitely naked. They were bald with domed foreheads. They had noses, mouths, ears, tiny ears, but their eyes huge and bulging without any eyebrows or eyelashes. He'd been abducted by aliens that fit into the grey category. He can't explain why, but he thought one of the greys was female. He tried to sit upright but was held firmly in place by one of the greys gripping his shoulders. He tried to scream, but no sound came from his mouth. One of the greys came over to stare at Platner with huge black eyes. Platner then received what he could only describe as a telepathic message. And that message said, "Don't worry, You're fine. We're not going to hurt you. What you are experiencing now has happened to thousands of other people, and when it's over, you can talk about this if you like. Some people will believe you, but most will not. Now, after getting a communication like that, he became calmer, he became more relaxed. The female came over with a long, rigid tube that she filled with blood from Plattner's arm. Further tests and medical examinations followed. It lasted about 20 minutes. He was then told to stand up. He was given his clothes and belongings. He got dressed and then passed out again. When he recovered consciousness, he was lying on top of the roof of his van, a mile or so from where he left it and encountered the UFO. On his left arm, a small wound at the spot where the female grey had extracted the blood. Just one of over 15,000 abductions from Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, and the Central American countries. Add up the rest from all over planet Earth, and we've got far too much information to even think about telling you.
My first abduction occurred in 1957 when I was 5 years old. My brother John was with me at the time. Above the hill behind our house, we came upon what appeared to be a round house under construction. And one man, a taller looking figure, he had a long rod in his hand. A light was emitted from it and we were paralyzed. I remember being taken into the craft, taken into one room. I was placed on a very cold, flat table. My brother was separated and he was taken into another room. They were doing something down to my legs. I could feel them poking and prodding around my legs.
According to Jesse, his abductors inserted a small item, an alien implant, into his left shin.
And it was in my body for 34 years. It was always painful. I always had to wear my socks below the incision point because it was painful.
The present moment I'm in Mexico for a whole range of different reasons, and south of me we've been telling you about Julio, the Argentinian who was abducted by aliens. He's not alone. There is a very, very well-known story. Now, what I'm going to tell you is documented and proven. There was a farmer from Argentina one day ploughing his field. His wife and children in the family van came past and said, "Bye, Daddy." Yeah, the wife gave him a kiss. Off they went into the city for the day, leaving him to toil at the farm. The crops hadn't been doing terribly well. It was very, very dry, needed more rain. However, there he was, digging holes, trying to irrigate his fields. The family off to town. 10 minutes later, he was very similarly to Julio there. He was lying on a flat surface in a curved room, and he believes that a female grey creature, one of the tall greys, not one of the short greys, one of the tall greys was on top of him, forcing him to have sex. Now, he remembers at first being shocked and not wanting to do anything, but he couldn't help himself because the lower part of the alien's body was doing all of the work and absolutely milked him of sperm. Now, was this sperm for sexual gratification? Well, you would doubt it. All the other tests were very, very specific and medical. Interbreeding. We've mentioned it before. Now, this is where it gets amazing, because he was found 1,600 miles away 2 hours later. Now, how do you get from a field in Argentina to Central North America? What was worse, he couldn't speak any English. And when the police picked him up, they discovered that he was bright purple. His skin was very, very badly burnt. And when they took him to hospital, they discovered that he was burnt by something of serious heat, and he was also very ill with radioactive sickness. Now, the only thing that could have given him a blast that big was if he stood next to a nuclear reactor. He was nowhere near a nuclear reactor. Not in America, not in South America. So how did he get all that distance within 2 hours after all this stuff happened to him while he was on board this craft? Impossible things, each and every time. Impossibilities. Now, he's still alive, he's still working his same farm. His name is Alex Guerrero, and he's been on television all over South America telling people of his amazing adventure and how he believes his alien child is out there somewhere.
There was another room that was there, and in this particular place, you could see hundreds of what looked like aquariums. And all these fetuses were in them. And I remember thinking, oh my God, and realized that they're coming, implanting women, and then they come back and they remove fetuses from us.
And this is what virtually all women say. And the goal is the production of these hybrid human-looking beings. A cross between alien and human.
It all became very clear what was going on. I always seemed to have female-type problems, and my mother had them as well. We would be pregnant, and then we would no longer be pregnant. We'd have miscarriages, but never actually found a fetus.
Now, let's just dive to the most recent episode that you've had with aliens.
Mm-hmm.
When was it? What was it?
Well, I was taken aboard a very large craft. I was dressed in my night clothes, but there were people along the balconies that I could see next to me. I identified one of them, and he has never remembered because I saw him on the street, asked him if he owned clothes that I saw, and he said, yes, but you would never see me in those because I'm not in the same area. How do you know I have those?
Man.
And I had to make something up.
Yeah, I was going to say that conversation's too long for the middle of the day, I guess.
Yes, that's true. But I had to prove to myself that I had seen him.
Right, no, sure.
There was a lady in a cocktail dress, dressed to the hilt, and she had to have been taken, perhaps leaving a party. But they were all lined up, and when we were told, we dropped the boxes, and I watched them just disappear, evaporate when we dropped them over the side.
And yet we can't seem to figure any kind of reason or function or end product there at all.
Well, I know what was in the boxes, if it's true. And it's a little bit mind-boggling. And then I found we've located several others that have been told the same thing.
Yeah.
That these particular individuals are gatherers, keepers, and deliverers of human souls.
Human souls? Whoa.
Yeah. And
right.
how's that for something?
Yeah, but that just puts the ball out the park, doesn't it? It takes us to a completely different place. So if we're talking about religion of whatever kind, irrespective of religion by the sound of things, because we're talking about people of all kinds, colours, creeds and faiths, irrespective of your religion, souls are handled by extraterrestrials. So it's up to them whether we move on or whether we hang around for a while.
There's so many questions. Think of the openings there and the questions. I don't know. Was it true? Were we told that? But we dropped something off the side of that craft in a box that felt very special, and they were not happy with the way this particular project was going. We could see nothing once it was dropped over. I'm in Florida, a tropical state.
You are.
When I woke up or came to in my bed, my husband came through and said, "You were taken." I was freezing cold. My cheeks were frostbitten. My night clothes were soaking wet. And it was just, I had been somewhere outside of the tropical state. Yes.
Finally, you've worked with abductees for 25 years now.
Oh, more than that now. Yes, about 27.
27.
Probably. Yes.
Now, the story that we've had from you is mind-blowing. It's impossible, I think, for a cynic, certainly, to believe any of it, I would say. Because cynic's a hard person to turn around. Yet there's little bits in it that you think, well, that could happen, and what if? Out of all of the people that you've worked with, all of these abductees, people say they're crazy folk. You used to work for the military, so you're not crazy. The other people that are, and you get this impression, probably made by the people that make wacky television programs about it, the people that see aliens and UFOs are always hillbillies with long beards that have no credibility. What about these people who have been abducted, all of these hundreds and thousands of people around the planet? You've worked with them. Are they all crackers?
Oh, no. Matter of fact, right now, I'm working with a monk.
Right.
He's 59 years old, and he's working in a monastery not far from me.
Right.
These types of people, they're not wacko at all.
Right.
I'm working with another military man, and I can't disclose his name or anything about him because he's in intelligence, military intelligence. So I take all of that into consideration. Very, very credible witnesses. It's a shame.
And if so many are being taken, Denise, why is it? And I know people read it here in the European press, and you kind of go like 47% of people in America claim they've been abducted, and we kind of look at that and we do kind of think, well, only the Americans would say that, and yet in America you're 50 small countries in comparison to the rest of Europe. You know, size-wise, many countries far smaller than any of your states. So, if it is so prevalent there, we're still no nearer finding what they want and what they're reaching for. You say they want to improve us. End product, we haven't seen any major sign. If they're trying to make us less warlike, no proof of that.
No, certainly not.
So, are we any nearer finding what it is that they've come here for?
I'm going to say we're awfully close in the manner of disclosure. And why do I say that? Because whoever's trying to depress that whole thing in us and to stop it from being given out and handed out, whatever this is, to the world, why are our computers, personally, those of us who work on this, being hacked more and more and more? Why is our information being taken? Why are we being warned by these, if you want to call them men in black? They step off on the sidewalk and say, you don't tell a word about what you just saw. We're threatened. We're followed. And it's more often than it ever was before. Yeah, so we're closer, I think, to disclosure than ever before.
I've always felt that we were building up towards something because there's more and more episodes of UFO activity. We're finding ruins on the moon, and everybody's always said, well, there's never been anybody there. But we've got photographs of this kind of thing from NASA and similar.
You know, I'm getting more cases from the UK and Australia.
Right.
They're all coming out all of a sudden in the last few months.
We're building towards something. Denise, it's been a joy talking to you. Thank you for sharing so much.
Oh, and thank you for having me as a guest. It's been a pleasure.
Are we being visited by other worldly beings on a regular basis? This is Alien Jesus. Close Encounters.
Now, there's one thing talking about UFOs. There's another, as we've heard, of all of these people being abducted or having direct contact with aliens of one sort or another. Not just hundreds, not just thousands, hundreds of thousands. And yet, earlier this year, people with telescopes started seeing alien lights on Ceres as never before. A Dawn probe zoomed in on bright flashes of light coming from 4,500 miles away. The images confirmed that on the surface of Ceres, somebody is trying to attract our attention. Now, the surface of Ceres, right in the middle of a huge crater, a whole range of literally hundreds of lights. Now, you'll have seen when spacecraft go up into space, quite often, as they're moving back down towards Earth, you can see pretty much every light that continents have on. Entire continents light up. Those with very few homesteads or deserts are completely pitch black. But they've spotted this amazing thing. They're completely at a loss to explain what these huge bright spots are. Theories range from salt flats, but would they glow? A giant ice volcano, somebody suggested. Dawn scientists can now conclude that the intense brightness of these spots are due to the reflection of sunlight by highly reflective material on the surface. They say maybe it's ice. However, what's made that little area be the only one on the planet shining? I mean, shining like a star. And if it was a volcano, you would think, well, it would shine and then it would end as the volcano declined. They're still shining. Is there someone there? Is this where aliens come from? Scientists say that there's a lot of theories as to why there could be a bright spot. The Hubble Space Telescope found more than 10 hugely bright things on the surface of Ceres, but the two most prominent, Spot 5, are in a crater about 57 miles wide. They said that maybe salt flats could reflect sunlight, but surely not with the glare that you're getting. Another theory, ice reflecting sunlight. Ceres is thought to have ice all over its surface, so why is it only shining in one tiny little place? These bright spots are also in a crater where an impact occurred. Is it a cryovolcano? Volcano shooting out water and ice? Nobody knows, but they're still shining. Both of these images, taken at a distance of 13,600 kilometers, 8,400 miles. And scientists saying if it was ice, the whole planet would be shining. It's not ice. What is it? Who is it?
MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, has collected more than 70,000 case files. They are stored in a location known as Hangar 1. Now these files are open for the first time. One file reveals that when British citizen Gary McKinnon hacks into U.S. government computers, he may have found evidence of a highly sophisticated U.S. military space weapons program. What McKinnon discovers seems to confirm what many UFO researchers already believed: that a program to develop and build space weapons has existed for decades, possibly dating back over 30 years to the presidency of Ronald Reagan. It is also said that this space weapons program is linked to UFO threats that occurred in the Soviet Union in the early 1980s.
So do you believe that there has actually possibly been an agreement between the powers that be with an alien race? So there's been a meeting between the two?
Oh, I do. I mean, I do believe that there has been some sort of a meeting where that took place. There's rumors to the effect that even at Roswell, for example, there was a live being. There's been some sort of maybe telepathic communication between the two of them, and that's what we seem to always get about the alien forms that are on it, on board the craft. And so, there's been exchanges back and forth in some remote locations of the military and deep, dark, whatever.
Wow.
And there's enough of these crashes that have happened to where, sure.
We must look like an ant farm to them, though, don't we?
Well, let me let me share a little different idea with you. If you look throughout recorded history, you see that these objects have been around.
Absolutely.
Okay? So they've always been here. We've had a relationship with them in every culture throughout just about every period of time.
Yeah.
I mean, even Indian tribes here in the United States have, that same thing. So bottom line is we've had this, relationship that exists between us and them for a very, very long time. How much they have tried to influence or shape our directions is undetermined, but we believe that there's probably some sort of influencing going on.
Sure.
And so, for the most part, I think what we have here is a situation where these beings have been on this planet for a very, very long time. And it's quite conceivable that they may have been here before us. It's conceivable that there are other explanations other than the fact that they have to be coming from another planet somewhere else. They could have been moving through time, through space. There could be a lot of different. And if you look at the reports we have, there's a variety of hypotheses that are associated with them that are all equally compelling. And we don't know which of those is the most valid hypothesis. For example, some objects seem to materialize and dematerialize. Well, does that mean that they're moving through space and time? Could be. Could that also account for some other interesting mysteries around the planet, such as why is it that we can't find a Bigfoot at the sign or after a major disaster and find the body of them after a hurricane hits in an area where they are?
Right.
And wouldn't you expect to see some sort of body after all this time?
Sure.
You don't.
Right.
So are they walking, along, and they somehow enter into another space and time? Are they from a different space and time? So objects disappearing or doing the same thing. Then there's some aspects of the phenomena that seem to be like that they're solid. They have physical effects. That they land. They're nuts and bolts. Are those coming from a different place? If you look at the Rendlesham case over in the UK, Headwaters, in 1980, you have those witnesses talking about, at least one of them, Tennyson, is talking about the fact that he believes that the object gave a message when he touched it, and it's now telling him that basically that this is a us from the future that are coming back, and that these are us and our technology moving through time.
Right.
So you have a variety of competing hypotheses. It could be all of them, or it could be one or two.
Right.
And yeah, exactly.
These are the fascinations that keep people like you and I chasing.
Alan Robson with you here in Northumberland, looking up at a black sky with 1 billion stars shining down. You can only see it when you head out into the wilderness, really, where there's no ambient light from towns shining back up at the stars. The ultimate solar system. Astronomers now are saying that it's possible to have a sun elsewhere in the galaxy that have as many as 60 habitable Earth-like planets. They know of 2 binary stars and 2 planetary systems with 36 planets similar to Earth that we would be able to survive on. 24 in another galaxy. We have the ultimate solar system. Dr. Sean Raymond is an astronomer at the Laboratoire d'Astrophysique de Bordeaux in Bordeaux. And he built a planetary system out of real planets and can tell us everybody interested in astronomy has fun with it. It's a great way to use your imagination. But I have found planets all over the solar system where human beings could open a spaceship door and not require a spacesuit. We want planets that are not too small, not too big, not too dry, not too wet. We want planets with atmosphere, surfaces, oceans, continents, worlds between half and twice the size of Earth, with between 10 times less and 10 times more water than Earth has. And to date, NASA has found many potentially habitable worlds outside our solar system, but most have been called super-Earths, and they're much larger than our planet. But they have a host star. They have liquid water. We have come to know these places as the Goldilocks zone, habitable zones, a belt around a star where temperatures are ideal for liquid water to pool on the planet's surface. So we've got something to drink. We've got something where life can emerge from. So it wasn't any surprise to me when just recently they came forward and said, meet Earth 2, Kepler 452b, the most similar planet to our own ever found, with a substantial opportunity for life. Now that's in our solar system. It's the closest twin to Earth ever seen. Now, why are they telling you this now? They're telling us, A, it's near enough for whoever lives there to come here and for us to go there. They're also telling us maybe because they've already been. Maybe they're already in communication with these people. It's surprising, isn't it, that we've been aware that all of these Earth-like planets exist. It could be the solution of 1 million problems here on Earth, dependent on the people that live there. Scientists now cannot disagree. There are billions of planets with life, not just the 60 habitable Earth-like planets, but there are billions. Think of how big that is. Billions of planets that don't just have the possibility of our style of life. They have their own life, whatever it is. Billions of them. Now, if that is the case, and they have been coming here, and we call them these Goldilocks planets, if they've been coming here into breeding with us, when are we going to get the truth? We're fighting for it every day. And when I stand here, just on a hill, an ordinary hill, cars way off in the background, you see the odd headlight going by. But when you get out into the darkness, turn your head to the sky. There's 1 billion planets, moons, stars above my head right now. How many have life? How many have life that come here to visit on a regular basis? How many of them are our brothers and sisters? That's the question. I believe we've been touched by aliens millions of years before our race hit the planet. I believe that they're still out there, still communicating with us, still probably abducting the odd one of us and bringing us back, which tells you that they're benign, they're not a threat. And those people who say they have witnessed them and maybe they walk amongst us, you only need one and the whole thing's true. Just one. Discount 95% of everything you've heard. You just need 5% of this to be right. One person, really, to be really abducted by real aliens, taken to a real ship. And the whole thing's true. This has been Alien Jesus 4, Close Encounters. Thanks for coming with us. From me, Alan Robson, good night, God bless you, and I wish you well.